Dr. Tariq Saab, please unmute yourself.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam, Tariq Saab, how are you?
I'm fine, Alhamdulillah.
Ji, good afternoon. We'll be shortly joined by our resource person, Dr. Sharik Masoodi Saab. So
Yes, sir.
please be in the unmute. Do not mute yourself. Keep it like
Okay.
that.
Okay.
All participants are requested to please rename themselves. Some of the participants are not showing up on their own names. And meanwhile, we are being joined by our resource person, Dr. Sharik Masoodi Saab. Sir, please unmute yourself. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Can you hear me? Walaikum salam, sir. How are you? Welcome to this particular session of the 2-week-long refresher course in sciences, sir. On behalf of Human Resources Development Center, I welcome you. And I also welcome all the participants of this session, though some of the participants are yet to join. We hope that they'll be joining in another couple of minutes. So meanwhile, we will start the proceedings of the day. Before our moderator of this particular session, Dr. Tariq Maqbool Saab, goes ahead to introduce our resource person, I would like to inform the participants that it was on the demand of participants that this particular session was organized on research ethics. Earlier, we had organized another session on research methodology on the demand of the participants who wanted that they should know the fundamentals of research and the basic concepts as well as the ethics related to research. Earlier, we had selected Dr. Salim Saab as the resource person owing to the fact that he himself has conducted a dozen research methodology workshops as organizing chairman and had ample experience of this kind of a course. Similarly, today we have chosen Dr. Sharik Masoodi Saab for this particular session because Dr. Sharik Saab has himself been the member secretary of Institutional Ethics Committee of SKIMS earlier. And in that capacity, he has had practical experience of the issues of related to ethics. And he knows what are the issues and concerns which mostly the ethics committee members confront when it comes to approving the research projects. Even yesterday, we had a brief discussion on how the research projects are approved or how new drugs are tested on human subjects and what kind of modalities are in place. And then Dr. Sharik Saab also happens to be editor-in-chief of the Medical Research Journal of SKIMS. So in that capacity also, he has an insight, he has a vision on the issues confronting scientific publications and the ethics related to it. So that's why we thought Dr. Sharik Saab will be the most appropriate person for this particular session, owing to his experience in these kind of issues. So we welcome him once again, and I request Dr. Tariq Maqbool Saab to please introduce today's resource person. Over to you, Dr. Tariq Saab.
Thank you, Dr. Geet Saab. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sharik Masoodi Saab. I would like to introduce Dr. Sharik Masoodi Saab. Dr. Sharik Rashid Masoodi Saab is uh, he has MD in medicine and DM in endocrinology from prestigious PGI Chandigarh. His fellowships include FACP. He's a fellow of American College of Physicians. He has a fellowship of FRCP, which is the fellow of Royal College of Physicians of London. So it's a great honor to be a fellow of these bodies, and it's a mark of recognition for the contributions Dr. Sharik has made in this field of specialization. Dr. Sharik is a senior professor of pediatric endocrinology and diabetes at SCAPES. He is a visiting professor of to University of Maryland School of Medicine, Baltimore, USA. He has received many awards, so including BT Crest Award. He is chairman, as Nisab said, of the Institutional Ethics Committee of IUST Kashmir, and he is the editor or in chief of Journal of Medical Sciences at SKIMS. His research interests include pediatric endocrine disorders, diabetes of the young, vitamin D, thyroid disorders in children, and research ethics besides medical education. He is the principal investigator of many studies which he is carrying out, which are actually funded by SEMO. He has a lot of publications and book chapters, more than 200, and he is highly indexed on PubMed. With this introduction, I would like to invite Professor Sharik Masoodi Saab to deliver his talk on the topic of research ethics. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Magul, for the kind words of introduction. I'm also thankful to the organizers, particularly Dr. Geer Saab, for giving me this opportunity, a topic which I love. And I obviously welcome you all. Thanks for being here. I know it has been a very, very engaging program, and you have been busy with, I think, maybe last 10 or 11 days. So it is not easy to attend these very, very engaging and very, very demanding topics. So I really appreciate the organizers for choosing this wide variety of topics, which I find each topic, I think, is very, very important. And I'm also thankful to the previous speakers, especially those who talked about research methodology, Professor Kuru and Professor Salim. That makes my job easier. So thanks once again for being here. So the topic I'll be, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please carry on.
Okay. So the topic that has been given to me is research ethics. So there are no disclosures related to this topic. How do I plan this talk? Obviously, I'll be talking about what, why, who, when, where, how of research ethics, and not necessarily in the same sequence, but ultimately you will know at the end of this that what is research ethics, what are the types of research ethics, why we need to talk about research ethics, what are the fundamental ethical principles of ethics, and publication ethics, and some potential ethical issues. So we first come to the first question: what is research ethics? And in that, first we have to answer the question: what is research? I'm sure you must have been told in the previous talks what is research, but there may be people who might have missed those lectures. So for the sake of those, I'm just saying research is nothing but a combination of experience and reasoning. So when we want to know about a thing, we rely on our own experience, the experience of others, and we try to look at sources beyond the immediate circle. which may be authoritative on that. It may be related from books, from the internet, from social media. And then when you have reasoning, which you may have Aristotle's deductive type of, or Baconian reasoning, or a combination of that. So when you combine experience with reasoning, this is what is research. So research is a systematic process, is a controlled process, empirical and critical investigation of hypothetical propositions about the presumed relations among natural phenomena. So if you go to internet or go to books, you will find a lot of definitions of research. So you can say it's a journey, it is an attitude, it is an experience, it is a voyage of discovery, it is a method of critical thinking, or it's a careful critical inquiry in seeking facts from for principles. But the definition I remember is very simple. Research is a systematic means of problem solving. It was given by Tuckman, 1978. Then what is ethics? So ethics is actually the disciplined study of morality. And morality should ask the question, what should one's behavior and character be? So it is about the principles and guidelines that help us to uphold the things we value, and the moral principles that govern a researcher's behavior and the conducting of an activity. So if you want to research, you need to have morally acceptable ends and morally acceptable means to those achieving those ends. So in nutshell, we can say ethics addresses the process of making decisions based on what is right and what is wrong. Now, what are the types of research ethics? You can have descriptive ethics, which asks what does the culture or society believe is morally correct, or prescriptive ethics, which asks how should I behave as a researcher, or what character traits should I cultivate as a researcher. Now, second question, why we need to know about research ethics? Well, research takes place in a historical environment, and history places the ethics in perspective. It has been said that those who fail to study history are condemned to repeat it. So therefore, to know why we need to talk about research ethics, we have to go to the history. And I'm taking the times of Hippocrates, who we call father of medicine. Of course, there's no mention of experimentation those days, but we find this quote, primarum non nocere, which means first do no harm. It is attributed to Hippocrates. It means at least if you can't help a subject, a human being, at least don't do a harm. So that is, I think, where the ethics starts. In between also, we have some various codes, like code of this Hammurabi. But I think what put research ethics into real perspective were these sentinel events which happened in 20th century, some unethical studies about Nazi human experimentation during World War II, human radiation experiments, and Tuskegee syphilis study, which I'll be talking in detail. So first, the Nazi medical war crimes. I'm sure you must have heard about them. This was medical research involving human beings, and mostly those were prisoners. And this created a lot of potential pitfalls that led to tragedies in the last century. They did all kinds of experiments. They would sieve the twins and then do experiments on one twin and see the change of the other twin. They would experiment with poison. The prisoners would be given different doses of poison to see their potency. They would do seawater experiments, and we would put the prisoners on the only seawater and see how long they would survive. Till the end point was till they would die. They did mustard gas experiments. They first burned the prisoners, then they would treat their burns and see how the burns heal and what are the ways to heal it. they would do bone, muscle, and nerve transplantation experiments. And again, it was not for the benefit of the prisoners. It was just to learn medicine or how they could help their own soldiers. They did head injury, they would hammer the heads of little kids. I'm sorry, these are some dramatic events, but it has to be, and you have to understand the gravity. Then only you can understand why research ethics is important. You may think that these things are not happening, but the basic way, the basic reason why those people would do those things that time, those reasons still many researchers use this time also. So I'm coming to that. So they would do high altitude experiments and see how a person will become unconscious when you take him or her above the in the air in the plane without giving oxygen. So they would do a lot of experiments, malaria experiments. Antibiotic only those days used to be sulfonamide and penicillin. So they would first infect their wounds, create wounds, infect them, and see how long and how will they heal or not heal. And then they would do those eugenics, the sterilization experiments. They wanted purity of the race, which obviously nobody would agree. So ultimately, when World War ended, there were medical there was a trial, and it's called Nuremberg trial in 46 to 47. So all these people, scientists, doctors, were tried, and ultimately 23 German scientists were taken to the court. 7 were acquitted, 9 were imprisoned, and 7 were given death sentences. But one good thing was also there. It led to the Nuremberg Code of 1947. So that is the first ethical standard or the set of rules we have, 1949. The tragedy was that the chief perpetrator of these crimes was Joseph Mengele, who escaped, and he died much later in Argentina. He suffered a stroke while escaping, or he crossed the possibility got drowned. So the Nuremberg Code first time introduced this concept of voluntary informed consent. So when you do research, you have to take a consent. So the concept of those doctors, all those scientists and doctors were not basically bad. Some of them were criminals, but some of them thought that they are doing a genuinely a good thing, because their concept was that this prisoner is going to be shot dead or he's to be killed soon. So how does it matter if I do some experiment which may benefit the human beings or the humanity later on? So that is why that it came that you have to have a consent. Even if the person is a prisoner, you have to take him consent for the research. And then to start with, there should be likelihood of some good resulting. Those people, when they would experiment on them, we knew the result is going to be bad. When you stitch a twin or break his head or do those wounds, you know that you are going to kill the person. So you cannot just do this kind of research. You do a research where at least from the beginning, we think that there is likelihood of some good. And so it should be based on prior research on animal models preferably. There should be avoidance of physical or psychological injury or harm. So at least you should not, if you anticipate harm, then you cannot do that. And then benefits should, there'll be always some risks, but the benefits should always overweigh the risks. And researcher cannot be anybody. Researcher have to have a proper experience, proper training. And even if the participant has given a consent, initially, the person has a right to withdraw anytime. If the person feels it is not going in his favor or he's not liking it or there's some side person coming, he has a right to withdraw. And research must stop if harm is resulting. Anytime you see the research is doing more harm, then you have to stop. So that is why people or ethics committees do ask the researchers do the interim analysis and find what is going on. But it was the first rule. Nuremberg Code was the first code we had, but it had some limitations. Now, one was that though it mentioned about the informed consent, but it did not mention that it has to be taken in writing. It was just you could take verbally also. And second, it did not mention of experimenting on children or unconscious people or others who may not be competent to give a consent, or vulnerable people. Nevertheless, the problems of research still continue to be encountered. Then we come to the human radiation experiments. When nuclear energy was discovered, radiation was discovered. So scientists from US and USSR, erstwhile USSR, what is now Russia, they had this nuclear energy, they had this radiation, so they started treating every disease condition, be it leprosy, be it tuberculosis, be it fever, anything with radiation. So when it was known, then those things were stopped, and this led to Declaration of Helsinki. All of you who must have done a thesis or a paper, I'm sure you must have written this statement that the research was done as per the Declaration of Helsinki. So what is this Declaration of Helsinki? It is basically the same code of Nuremberg, but it has some more things, like the consent should be in writing. And you have to use caution if participant is dependent relation with the researcher. You cannot do research on your dependents, on your close relatives. And also said we limit the use of placebo as much as possible. And there should be definite benefit to the participants from the research. At least potential benefit should be there. So the first declaration came in 1964. Then first revision happened in 1975. Last revision I remember was in 2013, which was the 7th revision. And despite this, bad things continue to happen. Bad research practice continues to happen. And the best example of that is Tuskegee syphilis study, which was done in the Alabama state, in the Tuskegee city. This study was stopped in 1973. Can you believe it went on for 40 years? From 1932 to 72. What did they do? This was by the health services. So it was the longest non-therapeutic experiment on human beings in medical history. Actually, those days, syphilis used to be a big problem. Syphilis was a illness which would kill people and involve all the systems. So some agent had been discovered in France, which they wanted to try in US, but this was time of 1930s, the time of great economic depression. So they had less funding. So they decided to convert this clinical trial into an observational study. They said, let us observe these people with syphilis, what is their natural history. So the idea was good, but what they did, they took about 400 poor African American sharecroppers, blacks, from the rural Macon County of Tuskegee City in Alabama. The men were told that you have bad blood. The way we have, sometimes we say, डॉक्टर बोलता है कि आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम, वो डॉक्टर से हम पूछते हैं क्या प्रॉब्लम है, डॉक्टर बोलते हैं कमजोरी, which is a very non-specific term. So they use this non-specific term, bad blood you have. And they were not told you have syphilis, and they were not told that penicillin, which had been discovered those days, which became the drug of choice, which actually eradicated syphilis, that penicillin was denied to them. And US government's officials went on to extreme lengths to ensure that they received no therapy from any source, so that they would study the natural history. And the irony was, at the center stage of this study was this black nurse, Eunice Rivers, who would motivate these poor people to join the study. The only benefit she would promise them, that if you die, you will get a free funeral. You know, funeral in US would definitely cost more than here. So she promised them you will get a free funeral from the state. That was the only promise. So ultimately, when some whistleblower made this news to the world that this is an unethical practice going on, and then it was stopped. And finally, the president, I think Clinton, in 1997, had to apologize to the nation for this wrongdoing. And Tuskegee city is not the only city that was happening. Many other cities you'll find there's a good review of literature, there's a good review on this in New England Journal of Medicine. You'll find so many instances where these kind of unethical practices were carried on. But after Tuskegee and once it became known, a lot of good things also happened. Like most of the countries started with their own regulation of ethics and of this research. Like Canada came with Trade Council of Canada. Then there was a national commission in US, which ultimately led to the National Research Act. And ultimately, we had also Belmont's report. So Belmont's report forms the fundamentals or the basis of the modern ethical research ethics. So Belmont's report had three principles for research ethics. One, respect for person. Second, beneficence. And three, justice. So this Belmont's report forms the basis of the modern principles of research ethics. So how do we conduct research ethics? So there are four fundamental elements of the research ethics, which are basically derived from Belmont's report. So there is autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. The first principle of autonomy means that you have the respect for the person, that each person individual rights, even if you are a prisoner, even if you are an employee, even if you are in a home, you have individual respect to accept research, to reject a research, to give consent, withdraw consent. You cannot say that you are head of the family or your employer has given the consent. So you have to obtain informal consent, which means you have to first explain what you are doing, then only you can take the consent in writing. And also you have to maintain confidentiality of the whatever information you get. You cannot disclose to any other person. Benefits means do good, provide benefit, and non-maleficence means do no harm, protect from harm, and you limit. If there's a risk, it has to be a limited risk, it has to be a minor risk. So you have to do a risk benefit assessment and using standard procedures. And the fourth principle of modern research ethics is justice. That there has to be equitable selection of subjects. You cannot choose subjects whom you deliberately want to benefit. It has to be equitable and it should include all groups that may benefit but does not single out one group. Even if somebody denies to be part of a research, does not give consent, but it does not mean you will not pass on those benefits to that individual or that population. Another thing which came with this improvement in ethical standards, that we have to make ethical review boards or IRBs, or we call here IEC, Institutional Ethics Committees, or somebody calls them regional ethics committees. So the role of IRBs or IEC is to determine whether the rights and the welfare of subjects are adequately protected and whether the city adheres to the sound ethical and scientific principles. So the modern research ethics is based on two things: that you need to have a board which will look at the process you are doing, and also you have to have an informed consent which has been very well formulated, drafted, and then has to be approved by this IEC. Then only you can do research. So just I am sure you must have been told about the research methodology. So you know there is quantitative research and qualitative research. So whatever research you want to do or action research, ultimately you have to make a proposal. So when you make a proposal, you submit to the ethics committee. The ethics committee has a chairman. It has a member secretary. It has some members from the basic sciences, some members from social sciences, some clinicians, and there will be an legal expert. There will be also a layman representative. So once you submit to the review board, so obviously you have to convince them about the feasibility of a research, where you show that your research question is important. You have selected an appropriate design. If the design is poor, that is also unethical. If the study doesn't have enough power, it is a waste of resources, that is unethical. So ethics committee will look at that. Then how you are collecting data, ethics committee will also look at that. Whether you are keeping things confidential, then how are you interpreting things, findings, how are you presenting them, so how are you publishing them. So every aspect will go a review at the ethics committee, and once they are satisfied, then they will give ethics approval. So you have to have a valid research design. The researcher has to be competent. Many times I find young researchers who are very enthusiastic, very knowledgeable, but don't have any experience. So they should start with a senior researcher, with a professor as a co-investigator. So mind you, even if you have a fantastic or a very good project, and the ethics committee is not going to allow you to research if you do not have enough competence, or if they do not find you are competent enough. You have to also identify the consequences of your research, ethics committee will ask you what are the consequences, what benefits can happen, what harm can happen, how are you selecting subjects, how are you taking the informed consent. They will ask you to read their consent in the local language, and if there is a trial, and then if you are using an agent or a new drug or a new procedure or a new way, so you have to have a compensation. If there's no compensation, you have to mention there's no compensation, so that the participant, once he knows that there's no compensation, he may choose not to participate, or he may choose to participate, but knowing that if I get a problem, I am on my own. So even if you don't give any compensation, but you have to mention the status, are you giving compensation or not. So one important thing is informed consent form, which has to be voluntary, which means there should be no threat, there should be no undue inducement. Often the participants or the patients complain that I was induced in this, I didn't know, I thought it was part of treatment, I was coerced to do this. So it has to be voluntary. You have to explain that this is research, that this is not a part of a treatment. And even if you refuse, you will still get the proper treatment, whatever you come for. Then you have to inform properly and then take the consent. So informed consent requires communication, not complex technical explanations or legal jargon beyond the subject's ability. So what happens is researchers often find that they say if we give a detailed explanation of the research, the person will not agree. But there lies the competence, there lies the ability of the researcher, that he conducts the research, but he explains in a way that patient feels motivated, patient doesn't feel threatened, patient doesn't feel that there's likely to be damage. So there lies the art of researcher. But there are situations where you have to be cautious, whether you are a researcher or whether you are a member of the ethics committee. What are those situations? If you are dealing with a vulnerable group. So vulnerable groups mean if you are very young children or very old people, poor people, low socioeconomic people who have low socioeconomic status, students, military personnel, children, prisoners, tribes, pregnant ladies, employees. So these are some vulnerable groups where you have to justify why you need to study them. Generally, ethics committee will ask you to avoid these populations. So if you say no, it is very necessary, then you have to show why it is necessary and how are you protecting their vulnerability. In young children, there's a problem how you can take consent. They cannot give consent if they are below the legal age of consent. So they can give assent. So they have to identify legal guardian, who may be a parent or somebody else, who only can give consent. So there are so many issues when you deal with these vulnerable groups. Somebody is in a home, in a protected home or in a prison. So how you take the consent, who gives the consent? So these are issues. So generally we avoid these people, but if it is must, then you have to explain why it is must and how are you protecting their vulnerability. There are situations when the ethics approval is exempted. You do not need ethics approval. This is research involving information freely available in the public domain, research involving anonymized records and data sets that exist in public domain, studies of public behavior that are purely observational, research involving the use of non-sensitive, completely anonymous studies, research involving the use of educational tests, surveys, and interview procedures on human participants in the public arena, taste and food quality evaluation, and consumer acceptance studies. So may I know, am I still audible? I don't know.
Yes, sir, you are clearly audible. Please continue.
Thank you. So how much time do I have more?
You can continue up to 3 o'clock, sir. You have, I think, 25 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So that was the basis of the modern research ethics we practice. So I want to now tell you what are the ethical guidelines and principles that we should follow. There are some 10, 15 these things which you have to be careful. One is the first and foremost is honesty in reporting data results, methods and procedures and publication status. Then second is objectivity, to avoid bias in experimental design, data analysis, interpretation, and peer review. Third is integrity, acting with sincerity, striving for consistency of thought and action. Fourth is carefulness, to avoid careless errors and negligence, proper documentation of all aspects. Fifth is openness in sharing data, results, ideas, tools, resources, and openness to criticism and new idea. Many times we are afraid of showing our research or data to a person or a friend whom we think will criticize us. But he is or she is the best person for you, because you know that person is going to criticize you. But in the process, you can make your you can give a reason, you can give explanation, you can make your research strong, because the reviewer is also likely to look on those areas. So the critic, if he tells you in advance you have this problem, you should take that constructively, not as a criticism. So respect for the intellectual property. You see, when we write a sentence, just once you are in social media, where to write a friend or anybody, just a sentence. How many times we write it? How many times we cut it? We check, is it correct? Then we pass on the statement. Just few 5-6 word statement, if you have to write, it takes you so much time. It takes your intellect. So when we are copying somebody's statement like that, it is like stealing somebody's property. If I have something in the garden, even if I am not using it, and somebody comes and takes it without my permission, without my knowledge, how will I feel? Similarly, if you use somebody's a sentence or a figure or a diagram or a data without informing him, without quoting him, that is a theft. So you have to respect for intellectual property rights, such as patents, copyrights, and other forms of intellectual property. Then confidentiality is very important in the context of communications, personal records, and privacy issues. We do not use that data which identifies the participant. We always use anonymized data. Then we have to be responsible. There has to be a responsible publication with an aim to serve the society. I cannot just publish just for the sake of increasing my H index or increasing my improving my CV. The publication has to, at least you should aim to serve the society. It may not at the end be of that use, but still your first aim should be that it should serve my society, especially the community where I live. Avoiding wasteful and duplicative publication, wasting of resources. Ninth thing, you have to be responsible in whether you are mentoring, whether you are guiding, whatever your role is, you have to be responsible that. Then you have to have respect for colleagues, translates to extending fair merit to the colleagues. Then you have a social responsibility, which means to serve the society and different stakeholders. Your participants of the research are stakeholders. Your pharma company, which makes that drug for you, is a stakeholder. Your society is a stakeholder. Your colleagues, your peers who benefit from your research are your stakeholder, or where from you take the data, they are your stakeholder. So you have to have that social responsibility, and there should be non-discrimination against colleagues or students on the basis of sex, race, or factors that are not related to their scientific competence and integrity. You have to give proper credit. At the same time, you have not to discriminate against a colleague on the basis of non-science. You can say other things other than science and academics. Then enhancing competence is very important for own professional advancement or lifelong learning, taking steps to promote competence in science as a whole. Then you have to ensure also legality of the whole process. The first legality would be you have to submit the research process to the ethics committee, local ethics committee, which will see the legality part of it, also the morality part of it, the research ethics part of it. So of the whole process, you have to obey the relevant laws that are in that place, that is institutional and government policies, whatever existing, you have to care for that. And last but not the least, you have to take good, the way you deal with humans, you have to also deal with animals, you have to take care of animals through proper experimental designs. If your city is a must that it needs to have animal models, you have to make a proper mechanism where they get the least harm. And you have to convince now we have ethics committees, animal ethics committees also. And if the human ethics committee or national ethics committee finds that you are taking animals, they may refer to the animal ethics committee, and you have to convince them that you are taking proper care, you are doing a proper experimental design. Now I am going to a case vignette, a case reporting, and say, just to give example, how things go bad or how they can go bad. This was actually, I was in 2014 University of Maryland as a visiting professor, and this case was very hard those days because possibly some verdict had been happened, and this researcher whom I'm talking had at some stage served the University of Maryland, though the episode we are describing is happened when he was working in some other place in Vermont, I think University of Vermont. So this starts with a graduate student identified as DN, and he was at the University of Vermont. He was basically hired as a part-time analyst. He was doing a part-time job to analyze data. He was helping the researchers and act as a co-author. He was, so this way, making some money and also getting some research experience. So there was a famous researcher there by the name of Dr. Eric Polman. So Dr. Eric Polman gave him some data to analyze and come with the results. So Dr. Polman's hypothesis was that women's health would broadly decline after menopause, that when ladies have menopause, when their menstrual cycles stop, so it has adverse effect on the health. So he had some research on that, and when this student or analyzer analyzed these preliminary analysis showed that some women actually improved their health. Polman had predicted that health worsens, but when he found the results, when he analyzed the results or the data of Dr. Polman, he found some of the things actually improved after menopause. So he told Dr. Polman, it doesn't show that what you are saying, it shows opposite of that. So Dr. Polman took the computer disk home for a weekend, reanalyzed the data, and got substantially different results that confirm his hypothesis. So he came back to DN and told him, well, there were some inaccuracies, some errors, which I have corrected. I have analyzed it. It shows my hypothesis is true. You please analyze it. So when DN analyzed it, and he found what Polman was saying, that the results were reverse of what he had initially found. So he was very, very surprised. He did not understand why the error happened. So then he talked to some senior researchers who had worked with Polman, and then he came to know that those people also had a similar experience, that when the initial results showed something different, Dr. Polman would correct the data and the results would be opposite of that. So that made the DN think that this Polman is actually doing a fraud. This is the original sheet which I didn't give him. The red means he has changed the results. In some, he had the after results were missing, so he has put them results there, and in some he has reversed the results to show that there was improvement after menopause. So I don't know if one of us gets something like that, our professor has done something wrong, whether we have guts to speak. But DN had the guts to speak, and ultimately there was an investigation, and after it was found that he has done a fraud, then he was penalized. The paper in Annals of Internal Medicine was retracted, and from 1992 to 2000, Polman had received 2.9 million in the federal research funding based on the fabricated research data intended to make his work sound more promising, and he had to submit that. And during that period, he had filed 17 fraudulent grant proposals to study the impact of menopause on women's health, the benefits of hormone replacement therapy, and other topics. His 10 papers were ultimately withdrawn, including several published ones when he was in the University of Maryland, where I was that time. So he had to pay some $180,000, and he had to plead guilty to criminal charge of fraud. He had to write 10 articles. He faced up to 5 years of jail term because he had, under oath, he had lied. And then he was sentenced to a year and a day for making a false statement on his grant application. So he is not the first case, not the last case that I know. There are so many cases. If you go to the literature, you'll find many of these cases, but this is just an example that how things can go bad. So that brings us to the topic of research misconduct. So what is research misconduct? So to protect the integrity of science, we must look beyond fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism to a wide range of questionable research practices. So that is, this is a nice paper which had come in, I think, in Nature. So they found that US scientists engage in a range of behaviors extending from far beyond falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. They had found in people who, they are researchers who had voluntarily given this information. They found 10 top behaviors, or you can say misbehaviors: falsifying or cooking research data, ignoring major respect of human subject requirements, not properly disclosing involvement in firms whose products are based on one's own research, relationships with students, research subjects, or clients that may be interpreted as questionable, 1.4%, using another ideas without obtaining permission or giving due credit, unauthorized use of confidential information in connection with one's own research, failing to present data that contradict one's own previous research, circumventing certain minor aspects of human subject requirements, overlooking others' use of flawed data or questionable interpretation of data, changing the design methodology or results of a study in response to pressure from a funding source, 15.5%. You know, many times when you take funds, you propose something, you say, I want to give, say, vitamin D, and I expect this thing will happen. So when you find it doesn't happen, or the reverse happens, then you try to change your design or method or objective. So that was common. 15.5% who themselves identified that we have done this misconduct. So these were about 3,000 scientists studied and come in Nature. Publishing the same data or results in 2 more publications, 4.7%. Inappropriately assigning authorship credit, I think that is very, very common here, 10% there. Withholding details of methodology or results in papers or proposals, 10.8%. Using inadequate or inappropriate research designs, 13.5%. Dropping observations or data points from analysis based on a gut feeling that they were inaccurate. Many times when we are analyzing our results, what we find, if we find something is not accurate or is not kind of going with my point, we just drop it. We just show what we want to show. Inadequate record keeping related to research projects, 27.5%. I think we should be very conscious about this, that you have to keep record at least for 5 years. I'm sure you must have heard this, a very senior researcher in AIMS. He had published a lot of good articles, and this one was about obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA. It was published in NEJM. Then, you know, in NEJM, they give some supplementary data, which is on the paper, but if you go to the site, you can retrieve that data. So somebody was interested in the data. So what he found in the supplementary data, there were some contradictions. What he was mentioning, the main tables, in the supplementary data, it was coming something different. So he asked this doctor, Dr. Sharma, that please give me this. He said, first he ignored, then he said, I don't have this. Then he said, I have my hard disk was corrupt, so I don't have the data. So this person reported to NEJM. NEJM investigated, and when Dr. Sharma could not convince them that how the data was lost, this paper was withdrawn, and he was penalized for some other thing also. So means, if you have done research, please keep your data there. Anybody may ask for it anytime. So how do we define research impropriety? Research impropriety is an ethical lapse or impropriety involving or occurring in connection with research other than research misconduct, as defined the federal policy on research misconduct. Obviously, that is about US. I don't think we have specific laws, but we follow most of these laws. So impropriety can be misconduct, and it can be other research impropriety. So it is the research misconduct is defined as fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing research, or in reporting research results, whereas other research impropriety includes, though not limited to, conflicts of interest, malallocation of funds, sexual harassment, discrimination, and breaches of human subject protections and animal welfare requirements. So they are not, you cannot say research misconduct, but they are other research impropriety. Now, the main things we often talk about research misconduct is fabrication, falsification, plagiarism. Fabrication, is making up the data or results and recording or reporting them. Like Dr. Polman, there was no data in some patients after in subjects after second observation, so he just put them there. Falsification means manipulating data. Like the initial observation he put as second observation, the second observation he manipulated to first observation. And plagiarism is the appropriateness of another person's ideas, process, results of words without giving appropriate credit. These days, now people talk about self-plagiarism. Like I have done a CD and I already published it. I got credit for it. Now I am doing another CD or I am publishing another CD. I am putting the same thing there also, without giving reference that this work I had actually done. Suppose I am describing a new method of, say, some cell culture or isolating a cell line that I have described in the first method, first paper. In the second paper, I cannot describe this method again. I can say I use the method in the earlier paper I was used. So you have to give reference. So self-plagiarism is also being checked nowadays, and it should be avoided. Now, another issue comes authorship issues and research ethics. When I was in ethics committee of the schemes from 1990, from the inception, that was 2004 or 5 to 2019, I would see many times papers, authors complaining that, look, I was a part of the there, or I am an author, but I am in number 4, I should have been number 2, or I should have been number 1. So I think you all know this. This is from phdcomics.com. I have taken this slide. So this may not be really the actual thing, but I think you see similar things here also. Like in this paper, the first author is the senior grad student on the project. He just made the figures, but he has been made the first author. The second author here is a grad student in the lab that has nothing to do with the project, but was included because he or she hung around the group, was just in the all group meetings. So the name is second author. The third author is a first year student who actually did the experiments, performed the analysis, and wrote the whole paper. He should have been actually the first author. He thinks being the third author is fair because he knows if I say something against it, my professor will obviously not like that. And same way, there is a middle authors. These are nobody knows them. They may be the main authors, relatives, spouse, or anybody, or maybe a technical staff or undergrads. And you find last but the second to last author is an ambitious assistant professor or a postdoc who actually should have been the second author, if not the first. Then you find him, and you have the last author who is the head of the department or the head honcho. He hasn't even the time to read the paper, but hey, he got the funding, so his name has to be there, and usually you put him as author for correspondence. So we find similar things here, but you should know that when you do research, you are a researcher, you are an investigator, but when you publish, you are an author. So it is not necessary that when you are a part of research that you become an author also, because the authorship criteria are separate from this thing. Usually all researchers or co-investigators become authors, but then you should know you have to fulfill the authorship criteria. So what are the authorship criteria? There are 4 criteria identified by International Committee of Medical Journal Editors authorship criteria. So number 1, each author, whether you are the first or the last or anyone in the middle, you have to have substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work. And number 2, drafting the work or revising it critically for the important intellectual content. Maybe the first author does the main thing, but second author does the second revision. The third author does the third revision. So everybody contributes, even if you agree with the first author, but you are giving your mind to it. Or if you you suggest a change, you are giving your mind to it. So accordingly, you have to be involved in the drafting of the work, whether you are the first you do the first revision or the last revision. And third criteria, there has to be a final approval of the version to be published. Because when you make a paper, it goes through a lot of changes. Sometimes of your own, sometimes when you submit to one journal and they suggest some changes and you withdraw and you again change it. So the final version has to be approved by all the authors who are listed. And last but not the most important, that you have to agree to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So you have to be responsible. If tomorrow somebody says there's a problem with the research, you cannot say, I don't know. Somebody put my name, they just did not show me. You cannot say that. You are responsible. Whatever faults you get there, you are responsible for those errors, whether they are simple errors or major errors. So the authors have also ethical responsibilities. They have to follow the committee on publication ethics guidelines, what is called COPE guidelines. The manuscript has not been submitted to more than one journal. Usually the journal will ask you that you have not submitted this already somewhere else or being submitted simultaneously. But even if they don't ask you, you cannot submit one manuscript at a time to many. If you have submitted somewhere, they have not responded, you have to withdraw it from there first. If they don't tell you where you're withdrawn, you cannot submit to other one. The manuscript has not been published previously, partly or in full, unless the new work concerns an expansion of the previous work. So what is called self-plagiarism also you have to avoid. A single study is not split up to several parts. It's very common here. Long back, we published our data on identity from Kashmir, 1995. We didn't know these things those days. So then we published the district-wise identity deficiency status of each 6 districts of the Kashmir Valley that time. So if this time I submit it, it will be clearly unethical. So no data have been fabricated or manipulated, including images, to support your conclusion. No data, text, or theories by others are presented as if they were the author's own. Plagiarism. Proper acknowledgement to other works must be given. This includes material that is closely copied, near verbatim, summarized, and or paraphrased. Quotation marks are used for verbatim copying. So when I am quoting somebody else, if I write exactly the same sentence, then I have to put in quotes so that people understand that this is not me speaking, this is somebody else, and there's a reference on that. When I am writing as a running statement that Dr. Geer mentioned this thing, this thing, this thing, then I have to make my own words. I have to change. At least if we have now plagiarism software, they will see if the 6 words of the sentence are same as the Dr. Geer's words, it is plagiarism. So if you are putting that, you have to put in quotes and you have to give reference. Now we come to the research. We come to the conclusion, summary and conclusion. So why we need to talk about research ethics is you have to think of those sentinel events, think of those unethical studies. So when you know there were Nazi human experiments, but that led to the Nuremberg Code. So you have to know what is Nuremberg Code, which is the base of modern research ethics. Then human radiation experiments, they led to the formation of this Declaration of Helsinki in 1964. And then the Tuskegee, infamous Tuskegee Syphilis study, which went on 40 years. And this led to Tri-Council of Canada and National Commission and Belmont's report. And Belmont's report, forms the foundation of the modern research ethics. So when you conduct research ethics, you have a legal and a moral binding. You cannot escape from it. But definitely, there are benefits if you follow research ethics. I have found many times the researchers or the authors, when they present their data in the ethics committee, and when a member of this committee raises an objection or gives a suggestion, I have found often the members, the researcher gets irritated. The researcher thinks we are an impediment to his great research, and it is not here. When I was in US, when I submitted my research projects there I found also the researchers do not like ethics committee member or ethics committees. So they are fearful of committees. They think they are bureaucrats who poke undue nose. But believe me, when an ethics committee member objects you or suggests you a change, you think that he is your best friend, because there are a lot of benefits if you follow those research ethics. It helps you in promoting the aims and objectives of the research. It helps in promoting the values that are essential to collaborative work and collaboration, especially about trust, accountability, mutual respect, and fairness. It helps in holding the researcher accountable to the public and society. You know, somebody is in a great research, but then when he is accountable to public, and you find that research was not that value.
Dr. Tariq, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Dr. Sharik Saab has got disconnected.
Yeah, I think so.
So he's still on our list. Let's wait for some time. He may be able to reconnect back.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Yes,
Yes.
you are audible. Yes, you are audible. Please continue.
So I don't know at what level it got this thing disconnected. I was anyway at my acknowledgement slide.
Perhaps it was just last but one slide where you got disconnected, sir.
Yeah, I was just acknowledging the role of my mentors, Dr. Abdulhamid Zargar, Dr. Dash, and Dr. Schildener from University of Maryland. And I want to thank the audience for their patient hearing. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not getting the window. I don't know whether I'm still audible.
Yes, you are audible, sir. Dr. Tariq Makbul, our moderator, will take up the questions from the chat window.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Geer Saab. So with your permission, I will take some questions for Professor Sharik Saab. So there are actually three similar questions which I will ask Dr. Sharik Masudi Saab to answer. These are questions by Dr. Shaukat Mir, Dr. Salim, and Dr. Shafia Jan. So they actually want to know importance of ethical clearance, guidelines for ethical clearance at schemes, and the requirement of co-PI from schemes for such ethical clearances. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a very important question, because ultimately at the end of the day, you want to know how to get the clearance. Though now we have many ethics committees in the valley. We have now recently the GMC, Institutional Ethics Committee, whose member secretary is Professor Arshad Hussain. That committee also has been now recognized. DCJ has given approval, and there are several other committees. But essentially, still, I think the SKIMS Institutional Ethics Committee is the main committee, or where you get the maximum people come there, because most of the people uh, want to have collaboration with the researchers in the SKIMS, who are basically clinicians. And there's a process we have. This time the member secretary is Professor Fayaz Sofi, and the chairman is Professor Afzal Saab, Afzal Wani Saab. Dr. Fayaz usually will notify when there's a next meeting, but generally the procedure is that we have 6 meetings in the year. They happen in the even month of the year, like February, April, June. So whenever you have a proposal, you have to you have to go to the site, IEC site. You have to go to the SKIM site. You find the IEC related information. You download the form there. There's a form which you have to download and fill it. There's also some other resources there. You can find how to make a consent form in English and in your local vernacular language, which usually means Urdu, sometimes maybe Hindi. And once you submit it, the form will itself lead you that what things you need. The most important thing, or what the problem I have found, is when the researcher is not from the SKIMS, then there are two issues. One, first he has to convince the ethics committee of his ability as a researcher, because SKIMS ethics committee will be knowing very well the people who are there, but from other institutes, so you have to give your CV, which convinces you that which convinces the ethics committee that you have a good research experience. Second is that when there's a collaboration, so it is between two different institutions, and we get a lot of issues later on. So you have to have a MOU. So first, when you think that your research involves a researcher from SKIMS, and so you approach him and then make a MOU, and you may have to take permission from the university also. So if your research does not involve a collaboration with any other this thing, so then MOU may not be needed. So once you apply it, then they will notify you when the meeting is there. If you have an urgency, sometimes there's a funding requirement, like you have to submit to ICMR, but they want that you should already take the ethics clearance. So then you can write to the committee. They might sometimes have an expedited review, or they may give a certificate that this person or this individual or this researcher has submitted this. We acknowledge this, and it will be reviewed in the due process. So you have to talk to them, write to them, or phone them. But the basic thing is, most of the time is you get the form from the website, fill it and submit it, and then you get a response, and then the process is self-explanatory, I will say.
Thank you, sir. There's another question by. So this is a question by Ejaz Ahmed, Dr. Ejaz Ahmed Dar Saab. So he's interested in knowing, are single case studies valuable?
Yes. So very nice. I see most of people get carried away, so-called clinical trials and RCTs, randomized controlled trials. But individual case reports or individual case studies have their own value. Actually, many people believe more in them because they are real world experiences, they are real world research. When we do a randomized controlled trial, what we do, we create an artificial environment. I make a specific sample that this should be of this age, they should be of this area, they should have this much creatinine level, they should have these characteristics. So I am creating my own model, which may not be practical. So when I have proved this tablet or a drug is good for or bad for a particular population, it doesn't necessarily mean that in the real population, the real world may be useful. So in that case, the real research comes from these case studies. Now, generally, we do case studies on diseases or conditions which are not very common. Like, for example, I had to do a study on the COVID. then COVID is very common. So you have to get thousands of cases to do a study. But there may be, suppose there's a rabies. Rabies is when you get infected by a dog bite who has rabies, and rabies develops. It is very rare now because of vaccination we have. It is very rare. So you cannot have even 10 cases of rabies in your lifetime. So for those conditions which are very uncommon or which are uncommon manifestation of a common problem, suppose I have diabetes, we have a lot of complications are very common, but there's some unusual complication happens, which you have noticed for the first time, is not mentioned in literature. So you cannot wait for such many cases to come. So in that case, you go with a case study. This comes under observation study, under the descriptive studies. We cannot make inferential statistics, we cannot make inferential correlations, associations in this, but this tells you about a topic which is very much, I mean, we don't know anything about that. So case study is very, very important in a relevant situation.
Thank you, sir. There's another question by SM Zubair. So he's actually interested in knowing about. So you talked about the fear that people have or researchers have about these committees, and he is actually and he talks about these fears and apprehensions, whether if they will get if somebody applies, will he get the clearance or not. But I think you answered this question in your talk. But if you would like to add some more, please carry on.
Well, is also a very important thing. That is how many of the researchers or even students still do not submit to ethics committees, and they come to us at the end of their thesis, or even after submitting their thesis when they want my paper. Sir, I didn't have this ethical clearance, and I need it now because the paper journal is not accepting it. It is asking me first, have you got the ethical clearance? And then I asked him why you didn't get. He said, I was actually afraid, I didn't know it, or I was told it's very difficult. And so this question is very important. But I want you to understand that whenever a person is a human being is subjected to cross examination, this is a really nobody likes to be put on a cross examination. Even if your family member asks you something, you don't want to be answerable to things. This is a general human like. I mean, you don't like somebody asks or questions your intentions, questions your activities. But you have to also understand that these questions or this is a process which you have to follow. Then only your research will be complete. So the fears are there, but these are presumed fears. Actually, when you go through the process, you realize that there was no need to get feared, because if you are honest, if your intention is to do a genuine research, if your intention is to learn research, the ethics committee members will definitely, even if they criticize you, but directly or indirectly, they will educate you. So even if that project doesn't go through, but when it's a question of your next project, you will know what what things they will ask. So you'll be ready for that. So you become stronger with that criticism. So I understand it is fearful to go to these people, but वो कहते हैं ना, डर से न डर. So you have to tame the dar. You have to take the bull by its horns. Okay. So that's a normal thing. Most of people feel like that. I told you Cicero was the name of our ethics committee in University of Maryland. Nobody liked Cicero, but then this was an essential requirement. You couldn't go away there without getting it cleared. So the fear is genuine, but when you go through, you find it was not. There was no need to get feared. So I'm sure once you go through it, that there'll be no fear.
Right, sir. So as you said, it can be committee can be critical, but at the same time, the comments will be valuable.
Yeah, Pound, they give you solution or they tell you alternatives what to do.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other questions? No. So if anybody wants to ask a question, kindly raise your hands. If we have time, please up.
Yes, we can take a couple of more questions provided any participant raises the hand. I don't think anybody wants to ask any other question. Nobody has raised a hand. Please go ahead and conclude the session.
Okay. So, with the permission of the coordinator, Dr. Ishaq Gisa, sir, I would like to present my vote of thanks. Sir, you highlighted issues of ethics in research, how attitude and critical thinking are important for seeking truth. That has to be based on disciplined ethics, and which in turn requires one to have right character. Do good, but don't harm, and limit the damage is the message you gave. You touched upon Nuremberg Code, Helsinki Declaration, which deals with informed consent in writing. You explained ethical guidelines and principles for all of us for all of us, and that we should follow, and why there is a need to avoid scientific misconduct and impropriety. Sir, your talk was a source of enlightenment for all of us. I, on behalf of HRDC, director, coordinator, and my fellow participants, with most respect, I would like to thank you for your talk and for your time, and for doing great service to humanity in general and to people of Jammu and Kashmir in particular. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
There
If
is
there are
there is
any, okay.
With
sir,
this, I would like to give the mic to coordinator Dr. Isagi sir for his comments.
yeah. Before that, Dr. Raja Nisar Ali, one of the participants, has raised his hand. So please proceed. If you want any ask any question, Dr. Raja Nisar Ali, please ask.
Sir, I want to ask who should be the member of Research Ethics Committee? I mean to say, how is it chosen?
Yes, we have proper guidelines for that. ICMR gives recommendations, and this has changed from time to time. The first and foremost thing is that the chairman now has to be from an outside institute. Previously, the chairman used to be from the institute. So, from 2013, this came recommendation or guideline that chairman has to be from outside the institute, so that the chairman is not influenced by the institutional people, be it their head of institute or anybody else. So the committee should have at least 8 to 12 members. Sometimes you may have slightly less or more, but 8 to 12 are ideal. When you need to vote, or there has to be quorum, has to have minimum 5 members. Those 5 members have to be, one is the chairman, then member secretary. Member secretary is always from the institute of the institute which hosts the ethics committee. And then there has to be the legal advisor or legal expert, and there has to be a layman if it's a trial, and then there will be other members, maybe a clinician or a basic member. But these three: chairman from outside, uh, member secretary from the institute, lay public representative, which is already chosen by a proper process, and then the legal expert. So usually the members beyond these are, there are some clinicians, some basic scientists, and you have social scientists. You may have a theologian, you may have NGO representative, uh, but must is to have a legal expert, to have a lay public representative, some people from some clinical medicine or clinicians, some from basic sciences, some from social sciences, some from the community, like theologian you can have, NGO representative you can have. Okay, so I think I have answered your question. Any particular reasons you had to ask this?
Dr. Raja Nisar Ali, I think he has muted himself again.
Okay.
So thank you very much, sir. I think we don't have any more questions.
Okay.
It was
Right,
a very
over to you, sir.
it was a comprehensive and detailed presentation indeed, wherein you discussed each and every aspect of the research ethics, and not only research ethics, but even publication ethics. You dwelt with very elaborately. You discussed what, why, who, when, how, and where of research and research ethics, its historical evolution, and various nitty-gritties involved. I don't think there is any aspect of research ethics which you have left untouched. It was a very, very detailed and very elaborate presentation. We wholeheartedly thank you for clearing the doubts of our participants, and I'm sure they will be in a much better position to undertake quality research in a very ethical manner without resorting to any sorts of misconduct or any sorts of just share out of ignorance any sorts of scientific misconduct. Thanks a lot for being with us. We'll be looking forward to have you again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Dr. Tariq Saab, you are requested to proceed with participant presentations now.
So we have, I think, Tariq Sarapuri Saab and Gauhar Saab were expected to have their presentations. If they are ready, so whosoever is ready can raise his hand and we can start.
Dr. Tariq, let me unmute Dr. Tariq.
So Gir Saab, can I take the leave?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless you.
So whoever is ready to present may please raise the hand. Tariq Ahmad Ganai, we have Tariq War. May I know who is ready to present? Tariq Ganai, sir?
Mute. Hello.
Tariq Saab.
Please unmute me.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Tariq Saab, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you
I'm ready.
please share your slides?
Give me yes. Just give me 1 second. I'm trying. Just inform me if you're able. Just wait.
Your
It's
audio
okay.
is fine. Yeah. we can hear you.
What about this?
Yeah.
Not that. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. You can.
Yeah.
Fine. So shall I start?
Yeah. Go on this mode, presentation mode, and that's fine.
So isn't it like that? I mean, can you see my slides?
We can see your window. If you go to presentation mode, then we'll only see the window you are presenting. We are seeing all the slides on the left.
Okay. So what I need to do?
There's an icon where you which you press to get.
Slide.
Okay.
F5.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, Tariq Saab.
Yeah. Now it's fine.
Okay.
Now it's fine.
So thanks, Tariq, for giving me this opportunity for presenting this.
Gir Saab gave you this opportunity, not me.
Yeah. But since you are the moderator of the session,
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, I congratulate Professor Mushtaq Sahab, in charge director, HRDC, and Dr. Geet Saab, who is the coordinator for this course. They have done a commendable job, and I congratulate for them this conceiving and then executing this brilliantly. So far, so good. So shall I start my presentation, Tariq Saab? So my topic I have chosen a very generic. It's like food security. So there's a various aspects of the. Through my presentation, I will try to take you through the various aspects of the various dimensions of the food security. What are the what is the world scenario, and then the Indian scenario, and then the last I'll try to just share with you what are the effects of the COVID to the food security. And if you just to share with you that this year the Nobel Peace Prize for the was awarded to the United Nations World Food Program. So this actually itself uh, points towards the fact that how important this issue is. So if we just go by the basics of that this is the food security is a situation wherein every person on the globe, anywhere living in the world, has an access to the healthy and the nutritious food. That's enough to keep so that he can lead a very healthy and an active lifestyle. All these are ideal conditions, but various governments across the globe, the United Nations, everybody is working towards the goal. If you see the sustainable United Nations Sustainable Goals. One of them was the end zero hunger by the end of the 2030. A lot of work was being done to meeting that goal, but unfortunately, because of this COVID, things have gone haywire. But still, the work is, and the governments across the globe, especially China and other countries, have done exceptionally very well in getting people out of the poverty and raising their living standard, because this automatically leads to the food security. So if you see, it means that food security points towards the availability, accessibility, and affordability of the food to all the people at all the times. So when we talk about the security, so we mean ensuring all the people across the world have an access to the sufficient food to meet their dietary needs. When you sovereignty means you have a choice to make their own choice about the food, what you want to eat, where it comes from, and how it's produced. When the safety means ensuring that people have healthy, nutritious food that is free from contamination or degradation. So when we talk about the food security, as per the Rome Declaration, food security exists when all people at all times, everybody on the globe, have physical and economic access to the sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for to lead an active and healthy life. So when we talk about the various dimensions of the food security, so we have what? We have availability is there, access is there, then there's the stability, and then there's the utilization. When we talk about availability, we have two sub components, that's the production and the processing part. When we talk of access means transportation, marketing, and the distribution part. Stability, that means affordability. Utilization, that means nutrition. There it comes, we have the nutritious foods and the good health. So these are the various components of the when we talk about the food security. So now why there's a need of a food security? The aim is to feed the poor sections of the society, to make it accessible, to withstand natural disasters or calamities like the earthquake, drought, flood, tsunami, to combat the widespread crop failures due to the drought. Now, if you see the state, this is this map. This was recently uh, published, and you can see it's 2019 data. We have the state of the global food security. This is what exactly is the scenario in the world. If you closely see the globe, you see there are countries which are best performing, and then there are countries which are moderately, which are good performers. Then we have the moderate performers, and there are the countries which need improvement. And if you see the part of the Scandinavian countries and the North American countries, they have done well. Then Australia, New Zealand, and they have done very well. Then there are countries where we have in South America where there's good performances there. The Russia and the parts of China where they have done a very, the good work has been done. Then there are countries where the moderate performance has been. It's like countries like India, and in some parts of Europe and some part of Africa, there's a moderate performance. But then when we move towards there are countries in another, if you see, which need complete improvement, and especially they are the countries like sub-Saharan Africa. Then you have the countries like the Yemen and all, where there's a lot of work needs to be done. So if you see this map, this kind of the status was based on the affordability, availability, whether that's the food is effort, because if you see one of the key component, there was a scheme which was there were two or three, we can say, the economists. One was Jean Deris, one of the finest economists. So economists India had, and Amrita Sen and others. They were of the opinion that yes, it's not only about the producing the food grains. If you see the country like India produce enough food grains, it's all about whether the people have that purchasing power or not, whether people can purchase or not. So that's why the affordability part comes, where people have the purchase power to buy it, and that's why if you see, there were the schemes which I have in the coming slides mentioned them, where the government made an efforts to make possible that people people have purchasing power and they are able to afford and they are able to buy the food. Availability, safety, and quality of the foods. And this was based on other 34 indicators and 113 countries, and the source is the Economic Intelligence Unit. Now, this is 2019 Global Food Security Index, which I just discussed, related to the affordability, availability, safety, and quality of the food in 113 countries. And if you go back and you see the best performing countries were Singapore, Ireland, United States, and the lowest level of food security, Yemen, Burundi, Venezuela, and Sub-Saharan Africa, where the wars, the droughts, continuously civil strife have made the things very worse. Same is the case with the Yemen. Now, if you see the topmost countries in the world for the food security, so that the index is that way on the basis of those 130 countries, 34 unique indicators. And if you see the best performing countries, score out of 100, Singapore, Ireland, United States, Switzerland, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Canada, and see the kind of work, and that's why you see the life, it's because of these interventions and because of this affordability, they have done exceptionally very well. Now see what actually is status in other countries, 2005 to 2018. Now, number of undernourished. If you see in the world overall, it's like 947 million people in 2018. This is 821. So we haven't done relatively that much of progress. But still, if you see, the things are looking better. In Northern Africa, it's Africa overall, we will not go by one, but just in Africa, it's 196 million were at that undernourished children, and then it's 256. So the things are getting worse. They're not improving. And over the period of time, that means in 13 years, the things have worsened. And if you see the Sub-Saharan Africa, 176 to 239, Eastern Africa. So in case of Eastern Africa, so they're not performing well. I'm not doing well. And obviously everybody knows, because of civil strife, wars, droughts, and unstable government. That's very, very important. And they're not being able to do well. Asia, Central Asia, overall it's 688 and 530. That means Asian countries had done relatively better in improving reduce the number of undernourished children. So Central Asia is better, 6.5 to 4.1, and over the period of 15 years. South Asia, 339 to 278, so it's better. Latin America, if now I've just moved to other Latin America, so it was 59 million undernourished in 2005, so 42 million undernourished. So they are doing well. So, and everybody knows, if you see the reasons are that there are stable governments are there, the governments have pumped the money in, the people there, they are moving the social welfare schemes and the various schemes where the work is provided to them, so that their lifestyles increase, improved, and this food becomes affordable to them. Now, this is one more statistical issue. This is the first is the map, and if you see, there are three parts: the concentration and the distribution of food insecurities across various regions of the world. And the source, we got it from Food and Agriculture Organization, and this is 2018. We have three. It's colored. We have three colored. One is it's like a light green, then yellow, and it's almost red. Now, if you see in Asia, so this is the total population, and then in Asia, worldwide, out of 7,633 million, 2014 are a moderate or have a severe food insecurity, and 704 across the globe million have a severe food insecurity, and that's a very huge number. That means 704 people, as per the 2018 FAO data, are at the risk of severe food insecurities, while as 2014 million are at a moderate or a severe food insecurity. And if you see by the country wise, the proportion of Asia has a good number of, out of 7,633 people, total population, you have 1,039. So that roughly becomes more than 20%. of the population is at the risk of the moderate or the severe food insecurity. Same is the case with the issue. I mean, if you go when you talk of severe, at that 354 million are at the risk of the severe food insecurity. If you see the Africa, out of 1288 million, 676, that's almost the half of the African population, is moderate or the severe food insecurity. And out of that, 277 are at the risk of severe food insecurity. In Northern Africa and Europe, it's only 89. So it's like relatively better. Latin America is also done, and we know the reasons. Now, if you move to what's happening, stats of food security. So it's a country of 1.3 billion populations, and if you see the annual growth, even in it could harvest more than 252 million tons of food in 15-16, despite the deficit rainfall and its consequences. So in 2007, annual Indian grain production was 284 million tons. In 16-17, 275. But I mean, it has been a great one dichotomy here, that India produces huge the grains which are sufficient to feed the people, but almost 400 people in India are at the severe risk of the suffer from the food insecurities. And if you see the pattern, the fact is that the reason is that the affordability and the purchasing power. Production is there, and there is also the problem with distribution, storage, and that part also comes in. But major part is that the affordability, the purchasing power of the people. That's why one of the famous schemes, MG Narega, was introduced, and that was the brainchild of Manmohan Singh and earlier, and his other co-economists. Wherein what done that to create the sustainable, or you can say sustained assets in the rural areas. There was two aims: one, to create a sustained assets in the rural areas; second, to put the money into the hands of the people so that they can afford and they can buy the food. So it was like 100 working days in a year, minimum 100 working days. In fact, that scheme was ridiculed when the new government came in, and in Parliament they specifically mentioned it. And time has proved that this is one of the best interventions the government has made. So you see the data, the production is there. So we need to improve on the purchasing power. We need to improve on the distributions and all that. So what are the various schemes? I'm just highlighting them. Essential Commodities Act 1955, that was launched in 1955. Availability was the target. Integrated Child ICDCS, and still working, and that was funded by the UNICEF, and everybody knows it. That was the aim was the utilization, midday meal scheme, utilization with aim so that to improve the enrollment as well as to provide the nutritious food to the underprivileged kids in the schools. National Food for Work program, that was launched in 2000. Antyodaya Anna Yojana 2000, launched in 2000. Accessibility was Sampurna Gramin Rozgar Yojana, SGR, launched in 2001. Accessibility. MG, that's called now Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that used to be Narega scheme. It was 2005. Accessibility. National Food Security Mission, that was launched in 2007. Availability. Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, that was launched in 2007. So these are the various interventions which were made by the government from time to time, and they have been working there have been shortcomings to them, but by and large, if you see, that could be at implementation level. But the motive behind them has been, to make access to provide money, and or in other circumstances to make the food grains or nutritious food available to the target groups. So just then there is this what has the COVID has affect the role on the food security. So in fact there was this there have been COVID-19 there is projected to increase the number of over 49 million. In fact, I was just reading a report, it will go is because of this COVID-19, 130, let's say 49 to 100, let's say 60 million people, or 50, even 50 people, are simply, which were simply out of the, you can say, the poverty net. Now they have gone back to the poverty, because this COVID has led to the severe disruption of production, distribution, and everything. And that's why there are a lot of people, and that's a huge number because of this COVID. So that target of the United Nations, that was one of the part was the Sustainable Development Goal. One was the zero hunger by 2030. We don't know what is coming our way in the coming this decade. We don't know. I hope so that things are better, but we need to be prepared, and we will have to get prepared. We have to pull our sleeves so that we make sure that less and less people get affected by the COVID in terms of the food security. If you see the stability in the global markets, this security remains high at the country level. Because what happens? People are when the people lose the source of income or jobs, and that simply leads to a breakdown of the domestic food supply chains. And if you see the impact of food COVID-19, it's visible across a large number of countries, with a serious consequence in the areas which are already suffering from the acute hunger and ongoing crisis, like Africa, Middle East, South Asia, which are affected by the other plagues as well as. So what has actually happened? This COVID, the income of the governments has also dwindled, or the income of the governments, you can see the revenues. So what the part of the money which they used to earmark for the welfare scheme, one of them was for, as a subsidy component, where the people used to buy the rice or the grains at a low price, a subsidy price. But since the government doesn't have the revenues are decreasing, they aren't able to earmark that amount of money, which is required for running the scheme. So what it essentially is simply leading to the breakdown. If you had 100 people earlier who were, 100 crore rupees are marked for the subsidy for the grains, for purchasing the grains, or you can say into the like the foods, where the people in the BPL category used to buy rice at 2 kg or what. But since the money or income with the governments is it's getting reduced, so in that case, the amount they are marked for it is
so
getting reduced. Haji,
you have crossed 15 plus 2.
So just give me 1 minute. So
1 minute more.
World Food Program that estimates that the COVID impact would be suffering. So this is just an impact on the global poverty nutrition. So if you see the number of poor people in sub-Saharan Africa, it's increasing. Asia, and if you see the another graph, you see the staple grains. Okay, there's not that much impact, but if you see the fruits and vegetables, it's going into negative. That means the impact on the global nutrition and the annual products. This is having a huge effect on the global poverty and the nutrition. So global economic recession in 2020 during, now you see world real GDP and household consumption is -1, export goods -20.
Thank you very much, Tariq Saab, for your informative talk. We have to have a talk by Riyaz Saab, and we need to conclude also. So kindly finish.
This is the last slide. So just have a view of it.
You made your point, actually.
Yes, thank you, Tariq Saab. Thank you. Should I?
Riyaz Saab, can you actually start?
Do any more?
Tariq Saab, you can stop the screen share. Thank you very much.
I think yeah. Go on. Tariq Saab, ho gaya?
Yeah, I think yeah. No, it's still coming here.
Okay.
I can see your screen.
So what?
Yeah. Okay.
Ho gaya?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tariq Saab.
Thank you, Tariq Saab. Thank you.
Riyaz Saab.
Tariq Saab, am I audible?
I can hear you, and I think you are in the process of sharing the screen. Yeah, I can see you. Welcome, Riyaz Saab. Please start.
I think both my voice as well as this slide is visible.
Yeah. I can hear you and I can see your slides.
Should I start?
Yes. Yeah, please. Yes, sir, please.
Okay, respected Gir Saab and moderator of the session, Dr. Tariq Saab, and my fellow participants, Assalamu alaikum. Since I have, yesterday given brief introduction about this first slide. So basically in my presentation, I will be talking about earthquakes, how they occur and what are the methods to locate the place where the earthquake has originally, originated. So these would be the take-away pointers from my presentation. One important thing is that when earthquakes occur, they generate waves that travel through the earth. So this is just like when you throw a stone in a pond, then waves get generated. Those waves travel in different directions. And in fact, it is not the water which travels, but it is the energy which travels in different directions. Same is the case with earthquakes. Whenever earthquake happens, there are waves which get generated, and that when the energy gets released, that energy travels in different directions. Then earthquakes occur when rocks slip along a fault. So whenever there are faults, this is simply, same to the fault which humans have. If there are faults in humans, then those faults will lead to destruction of the, humans. And same is the case if the faults are in the rocks, then whatever, exists on those rocks, so that gets disrupted. So then faults are classified by the moment, they occur along with them. Some faults move away, some come close together, some, slide past each other. So this is again, similar to our relations. हमारे पास जो भी relations होते हैं, कुछ रिश्ते बिल्कुल करीब आते हैं, कुछ दूर जाते हैं, कुछ, एक दूसरे के, बिल्कुल सामने से गुजर जाते हैं. ठीक है ना? So I will be discussing these things later on. So then one more takeaway point is that it is the, buildings which kill people. It is not the earthquakes themselves. Then I will be, talking little bit about what is the magnitude and intensity of an earthquake. And then my main, focus would be how to locate an epicenter. Then finally, is it possible to predict an earthquake? So earthquakes, as you know, these are also known as quake, tremor, or tumbler. So it is a phenomena where there is a sudden release of, extreme energy, which is, stored beneath the Earth's crust within the rocks. So when this energy gets released, so this energy, shakes the ground, and that ground shaking, creates, destruction on the surface of the Earth, as you are seeing on the, downside of the slide. So if the epicenter is located, in a seabed, or if a fault is located in a seabed or in a, in an ocean, so displacement there can cause, formation of huge waves, which are known as tsunamis. So these tsunamis or these sea waves, they can attain sometimes a height of more than 50 meters, which, also, wreak havoc in the, areas which are lying nearby usually in the coastal areas. So then these earthquakes, they also trigger landslides, and occasionally, so there are volcanic eruptions associated with these earthquakes. Earthquakes, they cause loss of life and destruction of property. In a strong, earthquake, ground shakes violently, buildings may fall or sink into the soil. Sometimes these earthquakes are also associated with, downward movement of the rock, soil, or snow avalanches. So these avalanches sometimes are so devastating or so destructive that they can bury the houses, downstream, or which are lying at the apron, or which are lying at the bottom of the mountains. Now the question is that why do earthquakes occur? So yesterday you might have heard this news that a magnitude of 5.1 earthquake occurred in the Katra of Jammu and Kashmir. So how and why these earthquakes occur? So one of the causes is the geological fault. So then another cause could be the volcanic eruption. Sometimes there are certain man-made causes. For example, you have mine blasts, you have nuclear tests. These all, lead to ground shaking, or, we can say vibrations on the crust of the earth, which ultimately leads to the destruction of buildings or roads or whatever, is there located on the surface. So what actually is a fault? So as I told you, humans have fault, but what are the faults which are in the rocks? So a fault is a planar fracture or discontinuity in a rock. So for example, you have seen, many fractures on the walls, on the, roads, but that, we in geological terms, we don't call them as faults. Those are simply joints or fractures. However, if there is a displacement along that, fracture, so then it is dubbed as a fault. So there are, three main types of faults which are, responsible for the generation of earthquakes. You have normal faults, you have thrust faults, you have citrixally faults. I will, be discussing these in a while. So this is, I deem it wise to, tell about the faults in the Kashmir Valley. So this is the valley of Kashmir. We have, Srinagar here. This is the river Jahlim. This, bluish line you are seeing. You have Pir Panjal Range. You have Great Himalayan Range. So you have one fault here. These lines with these small triangles overlapping them. You have here one fault that is known as man central thrust. You have MBT, man boundary thrust. Then within the Kashmir Valley, you have Balapura fault, and you have certain, smaller fault. So that means we are, living in a, location, or we are located in such a position that we are bounded by faults, and we are prone to these earthquakes. So fortunately, there are these minor, earthquakes, as I just told you, Katra earthquakes. So these earthquakes, these smaller earthquakes, they release this accumulated citran, and they increase this this earthquake gap. So normal fault, in a fault we have, for example, if a fracture develops, one block of a rock or one block of a continental plate, it moves down and one moves upward. So the one which shows movement, it is known as hanging wall. One which does not show any movement or slight movement, it is known as footwall. So usually, if this type of force is acting on the rocks, that means tensional forces or tension forces. So that leads to the formation of a normal fault. So in this case, hanging wall moves downwards related to the footwall. So here FW means footwall and HW means hanging wall. So then we have, if the forces are coming towards each other in the opposite direction, so that leads to compressional forces. So these compressional forces are responsible for the formation of thrust faults. So then we have one more fault in which the forces are acting horizontally but in the opposite direction. So it cleaves apart, or it shears the land surface or a rock mass. So then it leads to a fault that is known as citrixally fault. So other than these faults, there are other causes of earthquakes. For example, volcanoes are there. If a volcanic eruption is happening somewhere, so it can activate or it can move these lithospheric plates in different directions. Then they can give rise to the formation of certain faults. So whenever and wherever there's volcanic eruption, it ignites or it rejuvenates the earlier fault. So those faults can lead to the formation of earthquakes. So you have transform faults, again a type of this citrixally fault. You have here, as you are seeing these arrows, you have one lithospheric plate or one continent going down the another continent. Here again you have the volcanic eruption. So this can again be one of the causes of earthquakes. Sometimes volcanic eruption, violent volcanic eruption is there. It can again have the it can again lead to the this earthquake. So how these forces act on the rocks on the surface of the earth? For example, you have a simple landscape or land surface in which a fracture has developed, but there is no displacement on the right side of this slide. For example, if the stresses get accumulated on this rock mass, they try to share it apart. But as long as these rocks, they can, resist this sharing stresses, this, resist it. However, when the sharing stresses, they exceed the resisting limit or the sharing resistance of the rocks, then ultimately these rocks yield in the form of a violent blow or in the form of release of the energy. So that release of energy leads to the generations of the rock. So the animation you are seeing on the left side, so you can see how these this road, it is acted upon by forces in two different directions on this side and on this side, and for quite some time it tries to resist. But when these stress are so huge that this resistance of these rocks is overcome, then finally there is a release of this energy. So this slight movement, as you are seeing, first it leads to the foreshocks. Then when the main shock occurs, then these rock blocks or these hanging wall and footwall, they try to regain their original position, and that leads to the aftershocks. Now there is a terminology regarding this earthquake, how we are able to locate the focus and what is the terminology associated with the earthquakes. For example, you have a fault when there is a slip or when there is a displacement, fault scarp or a rock gets exposed. So the place where actually this fault happens or occurs, or this displacement occurs, that is known as focus, or where there is a release of energy. So as I told you in the beginning of this lecture, that it is when you throw a stone in a pond, these waves get generated. Same is the case here. This is the point of impact where the energy gets released. Then these are the waves which get which travel in different directions from this point of impact. The place vertically or immediately above this focus is known as epicenter. So it is the place where these earthquake waves, they immediately reach on the surface of the earth. So this is the another view of this, how these this is the hanging wall, this is the foot wall, this is the fault scarp, and this is the epicenter, and this is the focus where actually the earthquake occurs. So during an earthquake, we have the formation of different waves, or different waves get generated. They are known as primary waves, secondary full wave. Then you have secondary waves. They move in the form of crusts and troughs. They are land surfaces, or deform these rocks through which they travel. Then there are surface waves. These are the real culprits behind the damage to the buildings, economy, as well as roads, whatever comes on their way. So these are the most destructive waves. These are known as long waves or surface waves. So when these waves travel, you have P waves. These are the fastest waves. Then S waves. These are slower than P waves, and then you have L waves, which are slowest among the three. So P waves travel very fast. They are almost 1.7 times faster than S waves. So in simply saying that when P waves travel from when there is an earthquake, P waves start, then these are the waves which first arrive at a place on the surface of the earth, or they arrive where you have kept your this seismometer, or you can say seismogram. So P waves, then there are S waves, although they start at the same time, but the velocity of the P waves is much more as compared to S waves. That is why we first notice the P waves on the seismogram. So then S waves, then finally L waves. So this is the image on the left, bottom left image of an analog recording of an earthquake. The relatively flat, these lines, they indicate the periods of quiescence. And these, large zigzag lines, they are the lines associated with an earthquake. So now how we locate an earthquake epicenter? We know we have P waves which arrive first, then it is the S waves, then followed by L waves. So P waves arrive first, then S waves, then L waves.
Riyaz Sahab, you have finished your 15 minutes, 2 more minutes to go.
Okay, so I will be just brief. So we have P waves, S waves, and L waves. So we know that P waves travel faster, and then S waves, though the more the far away the seismic situation, or more far away the place where the earthquake has arrived, so more would be the difference between the P and S wave. So this is the concept behind how we locate the, for example, we know that the difference between P waves and S waves in a particular situation is 5 centimeters. In another situation, it is 10 centimeter. In one more situation, it is 15 centimeters. So taking these, 10, 15 or 20 centimeters as a base, we just, open our compass, and we should have a map of that area where we have exactly these seismic situations. Then we take that nomogram, or we can say that seismograph. So then we measure the distance between P and S waves from one situation, then we repeat the same to other stations. So then we open up our compass. For example, in one station, there is a difference between P and S waves 5 centimeters. We open up compass, then draw a circle, then same procedure in the another 2 stations. Then finally, the point of intersection of these 3 circles, it is the place where the epicenter is located. So this is how we can locate an earthquake. So I think this should be my last slide. So then what is the magnitude? So we know the distance, and we know the travel time difference between P and S waves. Here you are seeing on the top, P and S waves, you have 24 seconds. So we note this on this travel distance graph. So then we again measure the amplitude of the highest wave, that is 23 millimeters. Then when we join this 23 and 24 seconds, so wherever they cut our magnitude scale, that is the magnitude of an earthquake. So with these words, I thank you all for listening to this talk. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Riaz. With this, we come to the end of the session. And before that, I would like to say that this has been a wonderful session with very enlightening talks by Professor Sharik on research ethics, food security by Dr. Tariq Ganai, and last presentation by Dr. Riaz Saab, which was about how to locate earthquake epicenter. With this, I would, our session is coming to an end. But before that, I would like to thank the organizers of the course, HRDC, University of Kashmir, director, especially Dr. Gir Saab, for his appreciation and help with the moderation of this session. Thank you, sir, very much. Over to you, Dr. Gir.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq Maqbool Saab. Thank you very much for moderating the session. And you have been very, stringent in timings. Thank you. That is the way it has to be. Then only all the people will be able to present. And tomorrow morning, Dr. Ghazala Nisar, Dr. Raja Nisar Ali, Dr. Muhammad Tanveer Khan, Dr. Arshad Jahangir, and Dr. Gauhar Rashid will remain ready and prepared with their presentations. So they will present tomorrow, which will be moderated by Dr. Aijaz Saab. Then in the afternoon, Dr. Anis, Dr. Tariq Ahmed War will remain ready And I have also requested Dr. Sayyid Mir Saab and Dr. Manzoor Ahmad Mir Saab, who were actually supposed to present on Thursday. I have told them to be prepared tomorrow afternoon itself. So they may also present tomorrow afternoon. And because on Thursday, we have to conduct the written test also. So we may need the Thursday afternoon session for that. We may have the written test at 3:30 on Thursday. So we'll have on Thursday, we may have only morning session. And then on Friday, again, we may have only morning session because we are concluding on Friday afternoon. Therefore, we need to have as many presentations tomorrow as possible. That's why I have requested Dr. Manzoor and Dr. Sayyid Mir to be present, be prepared, available tomorrow for presentation. And tomorrow afternoon's session will be moderated by Dr. Firdaus Ahmad. So he is already engaging his presenters, and both the moderators are requested to make note of the presenters as well as their topics, so that we can get going tomorrow without any interruption. So thanks a lot to all the presenters. Very informative and knowledgeable presentations were made today. I have gained a lot of knowledge out of all these presentations. Excellent work, and thanks to the moderators also. Tomorrow we'll meet again at 10 a.m. Till then, goodbye. Allah Hafiz. And if anybody has missed to mark his attendance, just contact me, because for that I have to follow a different process. So they are requested to contact me. Just text me at 6 p.m. At around 6 p.m. I'll open up the window again for them. Whoever has missed, I think first of all the participants must try to fill up the attendance form well in time. By any chance, if anybody was disconnected or internet connectivity was not there, because these are issues which we cannot deny. These are practical issues these days. So anybody having any such issue can contact me at 6 p.m. through text. I will open up the link. They can fill up the form, and then I'll close it again. Thank you very much.